Blood found on the wrong hands. Prologue. Though the fantastic world of the realm is full to the brim with signs of adventure, in every story there are those who would prefer a simple life, without danger or excitement. Despite that, you can never predict when adventure will choose to show its face, as is true regarding a young server named Leo, who is most recognizable in his bright red coat, residing in the city of Prydell, located in the south of the Isle known as Timas. Our story begins on a very important day when Ariana Reed, the Lady of the Isle, has invited every important figure from around Timas to her castle for an event. The meaning of this event, though, is unknown to Leo, as he is far too busy discussing a different topic with Nora, a friend of his, who prefers not to attract attention, wearing the most average commoner's clothing and is at the castle delivering goods. Leo, having known her for years, offered to assist her in unloading her cart earlier that day, in hopes that he may be able to have a conversation with her.
I'm telling you, if I make one more mistake, I'll be living on the streets. I can tell they're fed up with my constant failures. I don't know what I'd do if I were to lose this job.
You worry too much. As long as you don't mess up too badly, what's the worst that could happen?
Don't say things like that. Now I feel more insecure than ever.
At least with your job, we're still able to see each other. I've barely spoken a word to Ant since he became a guard.
Well, he has been training to become one for years. It only makes sense that he would devote his time to it.
Say, isn't it about time for the event to start?
You're right. I should get back to the dining hall. Lady Reed's guests should be arriving soon.
The event begins just as planned, with the guests arriving and being seated at the grand table in the center of the dining hall, which was organized for weeks in preparation for the occasion. Lady Reed herself is seated at the head of the table, and despite her age, she is stunningly beautiful, with her grey hair flowing gently down below her shoulders and displaying an elegant red gown, no doubt made from the finest material she could buy. Despite her spending habits, though, Ariana is a fine leader. Timas may not be very well financially at the moment, but she still manages to keep their isle from collapsing. Beside her, on her right, is her eldest son, Noahive, whose light brown hair is neatly combed, as always. He is a confident and ambitious man, which is quite clear just by taking one look at his extravagant red suit, which very well may be the most expensive object in the hall, not to mention the golden rings on each of his fingers. He was always very vocal about his ideas, and it is easy to assume he would be discussing them with the guests. On Lady Reed's left is her younger son, Alexander. A perceptive strategist, many argue that he would be a better lord than his brother, would he had been born first. Unlike his brothers, Alexander's suit is much more modest, giving him the appearance of a guest more than a resident of the castle. This also works in his favor, however, as it makes him seem much more approachable, giving him more of a chance to discuss his unique ideals with many more guests than his brother could even wish to. Despite his hair, the same color as Noahive's, being noticeably less well-combed, which wasn't very much of a surprise, as he had never cared very much about his physical appearance. Leo, working as a wine pourer, manages to compose himself enough to carry out his task in a dignified manner. As he does this, he overhears a conversation between Alexander and one of the guests, without seeming suspicious.
You always study about how you could improve our isle. I'm surprised by how calm you are with the knowledge that your brother will become Lord of Timas before you have a chance to.
Oh, it really doesn't bother me at all. I simply study in order to be prepared in the circumstance that Noahive is unable to keep that position. I have full trust in him, and I'm sure he will make a wonderful lord, once his time comes.
After walking away from the conversation, afraid of being noticed eavesdropping, it isn't long before the servers run out of wine, and Leo, hoping to prove himself worthy of his occupation, volunteers to fetch more. He hurries to the kitchen, rushing himself in order to arrive back to the dining hall before his absence becomes an issue. Once he arrives, he opens a cabinet only to find that all of the flagons of wine have peculiarly vanished.
How could this have happened? I'm positive there were more in here. I remember counting at least 5.
Leo turns around to see a server he's never seen before standing there, who hands him a flagon. The server's green eyes seem friendly. Though he was unaware of who this server was, Leo was grateful to have received the contribution, though he wasn't sure why the man was there.
I noticed your situation and thought I'd help out. You may want to be more careful when checking the stocks of items.
Why, thank you. I could have sworn the wine was fully stocked, but I suppose I may have imagined it. Anyhow, I don't remember seeing you before. Were you hired recently?
Yes. In fact, I was only hired yesterday. I'm currently needed in another part of the castle, so I must be going now. My name is Merrick, if you want to know. Perhaps we can talk on a less busy day?
It's nice to meet you, Merrick, and thanks again for the assistance. This may have been my last day working for Lady Reed if not for you.
Merrick walks out of the kitchen and down the hall in a seemingly random direction. Leo, however, is far too concerned to notice, walking away towards the dining hall. Once he arrives, he notices with relief that the lack of his presence had seemingly no effect, though he is still sure to stand by the side in case someone needs something to drink. However, before he is able to execute his assignment, Lady Reed stands up, receiving the attention of everyone in the room.
Thank you all for attending this occasion. I invited you all here to announce my opinion on the recent happenings of the realm. It is true that this land is not as prosperous as it once was, but there is still hope for the Isle of Timas in these dark times. Though Lord Sparrow of Crown Rock has become independent, we must side with the king if Timas is to return to its former state.
Proposing a toast, Ariana picks up her glass of wine, and each of the guests do the same.
To the king and Timas, where the secret to immortality is said to reside.
The toast is interrupted, however, when Ariana's son, Noahive, suddenly sneezes, knocking the glass out of her hand.
Oh, how clumsy of me. I'm sorry, Mother. You there? Come refill it.
Noahive points to Leo, clearly indicating for him specifically to carry out the task. Though Leo is surprised to be called upon, he isn't nearly incompetent enough to disobey a direct order from Lady Reed's son. Without hesitation, he walks to the head of the table where Lady Reed is seated and refills her wine, before walking back to where he was standing, blissfully unaware that he had made one of the worst mistakes of his life. Chapter 1. Into the Forest. Leo rests on the cold, hard floor of a cage in the back of a cart, not entirely sure how he should react to the previous events. They occurred so quickly, it almost seemed like a blur. Leo recognized the woman driving the cart as a guard by the name of Evelyn, who was always seen wearing a completely plain suit of armor, which for someone at her level was quite uncommon, as most would be boasting medals or at least wearing some sort of cape with the colors of House Reed. Her blonde hair was cut shorter than that of most women in Prydell, which was common with female guard throughout Timas. He recalls noticing her patrolling throughout Prydell, always with an aura of pride surrounding her. Leo tried to convince her that he was innocent when he was being detained, but she didn't believe a word he said, and doesn't speak a word after, until night begins to fall.
I still don't understand what would possess a man like you to poison Lady Reed, as working for her was your current source of income, and you clearly don't have any other opportunities for an occupation. What made you think no one would assume it was you who killed her?
Just as I told you before, I'm innocent. I didn't poison the flagon. It was given to me by a server named Merrick. I can even tell you what he looks like.
If I were to believe every prisoner who claimed to be innocent, I wouldn't have a perfect record of transporting criminals, would I? I'm the most likely candidate to become the next captain of the guards, and I'm not going to throw that away anytime soon.
I understand, but don't you have a sense of justice? How could you arrest an innocent man without hesitation?
I have no reason to believe you're innocent. The most you've given me is a way that you could be innocent, but you're still the most likely suspect, and the people of Prydell would lose faith in the guards if no one was arrested after the murder of Lady Reed. The citizens are everything to a city, so it is in the hands of the guards to protect their trust in the law.
Leo is unable to respond to Evelyn's reply. Her logic seems sound to him, and he can't deny that he would do the same in her situation. He was always inspired by the guards as a child, even having gone through a phase of wanting to become one. So he could imagine how outraged he would be if the Lady of Timas was killed and no one took the fall for it.
You know, if you don't cause any trouble, I'm sure you could be given some wine before entering the pit.
After what it's costed me today, I don't think I can look at wine the same way again.
Huh, suit yourself. But I would happily accept one last drink if I were in your shoes.
Leo simply looks away in silence as the evening sky fades to darkness. It suddenly becomes apparent that the time for him to put his plan into action has arrived. Evelyn was clearly trained to withstand long amounts of time without sleep, so waiting longer would be nothing more than a burden. So Leo has decided it would be best for him to escape the moment it is dark enough for the shadows to hide him, as he fled from the cart. As the time he chose to put his plan into action shows its face, Leo retrieves a small fork from his pocket, which his friend Ant had slipped to him as he was brought outside the city. Carefully, as quiet as he can manage, he begins picking the lock of the cage, which was fortunately facing the back of the cart. Though it's difficult, as Leo was unable to see the lock he's picking, it soon drops to the ground. And before Evelyn has time to react, he opens the door and jumps from the cart, sprinting as soon as he touches the ground.
Get back here, criminal!
Leo ignores Evelyn, continuing his escape into the forest at the edge of the path. As he does, an arrow flies past his leg, missing its target by a narrow margin. The guard clearly wasn't trying to kill him, instead attempting to render Leo's legs immobile. Once Leo is too far into the forest to be seen, Evelyn puts away her bow and moves her cart to the side of the road.
Huh. Not the first hunt I've been on.
Equipping her sword, Evelyn detaches her cart and rides her horse into the forest, slashing down any foliage that has the misfortune of blocking her path. Chapter 2: A Plan of Action. As the sun climbs into the sky the next morning, Evelyn notices a small farm not far from her. Her attempt to locate Leo was unsuccessful thus far, so it's only logical to look at this farm for clues on the whereabouts of the escaped criminal. As she neared the farm, holstering her sword so as not to intimidate whoever owns it, an elderly man sees her and walks over to her in a friendly manner, scratching his almost bald head, which was only able to cling to a few white hairs that stood the test of time.
It's rare that we see guards around this area. What brings you here?
I'm searching for an escaped criminal. You wouldn't happen to have seen anyone suspicious lurking around here, would you?
Well, I haven't seen anyone, but my son told me earlier he saw someone very strange looking last night. He heard something from his room, and when he made his way out into the field, he saw a young man observing our crops. His son scared him away before he could make a decision, though.
It's a bit strange that a criminal wouldn't take anything. Did your son mention what the man looked like?
No, but I can certainly call him so he can tell you. Rowan! Rowan, this young woman has something to ask you.
Rowan, the farmer's son who's working at the other end of the field, looks up and walks toward them. Unlike his father's, his hair is a dark shade of brown, but it is cut so short it's almost hard to tell. His beige clothing is covered in dirt, and he looks somewhat tired, having been woken up in the middle of the night, but is still able to reply with utmost enthusiasm.
What is it that you need of me?
Your father told me of a suspicious man you saw lurking around just last night. Can you recall what he looked like?
Well, if I remember correctly, he was wearing a bright red coat, and he looked awfully tired and hungry. I watched him stand there for quite some time before I decided to chase him off. It looked like he was going straight towards Prydell. I hope that's useful?
It is. Thank you.
After leaving the farm, Evelyn returns to the place where she left her cart and begins heading back toward Prydell. It isn't long before she arrives. She still doesn't understand why Leo didn't steal from the farm, but she decides to dismiss it. Somewhat embarrassed, Evelyn tries to avoid eye contact with the citizens of Prydell as she makes her way through the city. Of course, they aren't aware that her prisoner escaped, or that she hasn't been able to find him afterward. But there was always the possibility that they may wonder why she returned so quickly, as it usually would have taken her a few more days to return from delivering a prisoner to the pit. Though she may have lost Leo, Evelyn is hopeful that he would be coming to Prydell. She can't imagine why Leo would want to return there, but assumes his thirst for blood isn't quenched just yet. Even though she is sure she'll be able to capture Leo once he returns, she finds herself making her way to the Prydell Guards base, where the captain of the guards is normally located. As Evelyn enters, she notices the captain standing not very far from the door. His scruffy, unshaven beard is the same shade of brown as his hair, and, as always, his armor is covered in badges. So much so that the armor itself was barely visible. Ignoring her instincts, Evelyn walks over to him, not completely sure how to explain to him that she failed.
Hello, Captain Lincoln. I have news about the murderer of Lady Reed.
You've returned peculiarly early, and I would hate to see your perfect record be tarnished.
Unfortunately, that is the case. However, I have reason to believe he is returning to Prydell. I'd like to request that I be positioned at the gates so I can be sure he isn't able to sneak in. I doubt anyone would be willing to help him, seeing as he murdered the Lady of Temas himself.
Very well. You may be positioned at the gates, but if he isn't captured within 3 days, you will lose your position as a guard.
Yes, sir. I understand completely.
As Evelyn leaves the guard's base, Captain Lincoln walks to a new recruit, who he was told was a friend of Ariana Reed's killer. He's wearing the standard armor given to all new recruits, but it's clear from the look in his brown eyes that this particular recruit's armor won't be blank for long.
You were once good friends with the man who murdered Lady Reed, correct?
Yes, sir. Leo was a good friend of mine, but I assure you, I had nothing to do with it.
Don't worry, I'm well aware that you are completely loyal to Prydell. The reason I wanted to know is because the prisoner has escaped, and I have an idea to recapture him that requires your help.
Chapter 3. Escaping once again. Nora, Leo's friend from the market, pulls a cart of fruits and vegetables to the gates of Prydell, stopping at the entrance as there is a guard positioned there.
I'd like to ask you some questions. What are you bringing into the city?
It's just some fruits and vegetables for the market that I bought from the next town over. Our stocks are low after the feast yesterday.
Could I check your cart? We have information suggesting that the murderer of Lady Reed will attempt to enter the city.
Don't bother. We have a long line of carts to check, and Nora comes through here very often. She's trustworthy.
In that case, you may pass.
Thank you. I'll be sure to keep an eye out for that terrible man. I wouldn't want anyone else to be hurt.
The guards, clearly confident in their decision, step aside, allowing Nora to enter. As soon as she is out of the guard's sight, she turns into an alleyway where no one is able to see her. Standing there is Ant. Once she stops, the fruits and vegetables in the cart begin moving, and Leo climbs out, dropping onto the ground.
Thanks, you two. I'm not sure how I could have ever made it through those gates without your help.
You have no need to thank us. We would never allow you to be sent to the pit.
Never mind that. If we stay here long, we may attract unwanted attention. It would be best for you to hide immediately.
I suppose you're right. Are you certain you don't feel guilty for assisting me? You are a guard, after all.
I may be a guard, but I never agree to give up my loyalty to what I hold dear. Besides, if you were to hide in Nora's home, her husband would surely notice you, and I doubt he'd be very keen to allow a criminal to stay there.
Leo drapes a cloak over his head, and as Nora returns to the market, he and Ant make their way to his home, mostly traveling behind the houses to avoid being seen. When they arrive, Leo carefully climbs into the window, which, oddly, faced Prydel's walls, isolated from the rest of the city. And, less inclined to climb into his own home, goes to the other side and comes through the front door.
It appears our plan was a success. There's still quite a while before my shift. So, how about I prepare a supper for us?
Ant doesn't take long preparing the supper, and the two sit down, eating without speaking much. Leo, despite his terrible hunger, is able to control himself, and remains civilized. Ant, however, having known him since they were children, is easily able to see through his facade.
You were starving, weren't you?
I was. There was nothing for me to eat when I was traveling back to Prydell. I did come across a farm along the way, but I couldn't bring myself to steal. It's against what I believe in.
Well, that's quite noble of you.
Say, do you remember when we used to pretend to be guards when we were children?
How could I forget? We would always sneak off into the forest and use sticks as swords, pretending rocks were criminals. We were always so passionate about joining the guards. It just now occurred to me that I never asked you why you decided against the idea in the end.
I'm not completely sure, but I like to think it was because I prefer to live a more quiet and simple life. I didn't want to get caught up in any fights or have to capture anyone. I just wanted to live an honest life, not bothering anyone. I suppose that didn't exactly go as planned, though, did it?
Yes, I suppose you're right. Never mind that, though. My shift will be starting soon. Are you sure you're comfortable with me leaving?
Of course. I need some rest anyway.
As Ant leaves the house, Leo lies down in a bed that Ant told him he was free to use, feeling safer than he has in days. Having been forced to sleep on the cold forest floor for quite a day or two, Leo falls asleep the moment his head touches the pillow. Many hours later, he awakes with a feeling of dread building inside of him. He peeks out the window to see that there are guards headed down the street toward the house, with Ant at the head of them leading the way.
That backstabber! He had this planned all along!
Acting quickly, Leo opens the window and climbs onto the roof, hearing the guards below drawing their bows. As he runs along the rooftops, arrows fly past Leo, some very nearly hitting their target. Once Leo is out of the guard's sight, Captain Lincoln walks up to Ant and holds a knife to his throat, almost drawing blood.
You may not understand this, but seeing as our killer seemingly knew of our plan to capture him, your loyalty is becoming increasingly more questionable. If anything like this happens again, I won't hesitate to assume that you're working with Lady Reed's killer. Is that understood?
Yes, sir.
Chapter 4. The Masked Man. Leo awakes with a start, suddenly aware that he had fallen asleep in a vacant alleyway the night before. Ant's betrayal still stings him deeply, erasing the bond the two once had. Brushing the thought aside, it becomes clear to Leo that, now that he has returned to Prydell, he needs to find a way to prove his innocence. He wouldn't be able to do that, though, if he was found by a civilian. Thinking quickly, Leo picks up some abandoned rags and disguises himself as a beggar. Unaware of what to do next, he begins eavesdropping on conversations between unsuspecting civilians. It takes a while, but he is eventually able to hear something useful regarding Lady Reed's death.
This is all the fault of that Oculi fellow. It's obvious that Lady Reed's life was taken using one of his potions.
I agree. I hear that Lady Reed wanted to close down his business, but instead he just moved to the far east side of Prydell.
Having heard enough, Leo travels east, going unnoticed thanks to his crude disguise. After a bit of trial and error, Leo finds himself standing at the door of a small shop, with a sign displaying the title of Oculi's Potions.
So this is the place.
Leo opens the door of the shop and walks in. Inside, there are labeled bottles filled with liquids of many colors, lining poorly built shelves on the walls. The handwriting on the bottles is so inadequately written, it's incomprehensible. At the counter, there is a rather strange-looking man, scribbling a label onto a bottle and placing it on a shelf near him. The man's hair is uncombed and falls down to his shoulders clumsily. He rubs his tired eyes, and as he brings his hands away from them, Leo is able to see that, strangely, his pupils are entirely silver.
I assume you're Oculi?
The man at the counter looks up at Leo, not having noticed his presence beforehand.
Yes, that is what I go by, but it is certainly not my true name. I decided to use it as an alias, as I grew tired of the name I was given.
I don't mean any offense by this, but why would you choose to tell me that?
To be honest, I've grown a bit tired of this name. I'm considering changing it. But I've been using this name for so long. I'm still not sure I'm ready to part with it.
Never mind that. Do you have a potion that I could slip into a drink to kill someone?
Oh, so you want to know that too. At least a dozen people have barged in here asking me that, so you're going to need a bit more persuasion than that if you want me to give you any information. Besides, I don't sell to anyone wearing a disguise.
In that case, you must know who killed Lady Reed with one of your potions.
Well, I've only sold that potion to one person recently, but they were wearing a disguise. However, they had beautiful golden rings on, which means they must have quite a lot of gold. I charged them quite a lot more than the potion was worth, and they agreed to my terms. Honestly, I wish I had charged more.
Actually, that was more help than you think. Thank you. I think I know who Lady Reed's true killer was now.
So you used my tendency to rant to your advantage. That's quite mischievous of you, but I can't say I wouldn't do the same. I like the way you think. I hope you figure out what you needed that information for, if that means anything.
Leo rushes out of the shop and begins running through the shadows. Chapter 5. Confrontation. Late in the evening, Evelyn leaves a popular inn in the middle of Prydell known as the Lost Jester, looking discouraged. Another guard took her place at Prydell's entrance earlier that day, so without any other way to find Leo, she began asking whoever she could find if they had seen anyone suspiciously lurking around, to no avail. Just as she is about to enter another busy inn called the Beekeeper, a familiar voice grabs her attention.
Hey, come over here. I need to talk to you.
Evelyn glances at the nearby alleyway to see Leo standing there partially hidden by the shadows. Allowing him no time to escape, she equips her sword and runs to him, pointing the sword toward his throat.
So you finally decide to show your face. I won't allow you to kill anyone else.
Wait, just put down the sword and hear me out. I believe I've discovered who Lady Reed's killer truly was. If I'm able to confront them, I can see if my theory is correct, but I'll require your help to do so.
Evelyn lowers her sword. Though she is determined to capture Leo, it seems that he is telling the truth, and she certainly wouldn't want to punish an innocent man. It seems to her that there is only one option.
Fine. I'll play along, but if you're incorrect, I will not hesitate to arrest you.
Leo explains his plan to Evelyn as they creep through the shadows toward their destination. She is a bit skeptical at first, but his logic seems sound. Soon enough, they arrive at the castle that was previously owned by Ariana Reed. Wanting not to attract attention, they manage to climb through a window in the back. Though it is dark, Evelyn is able to assist Leo in traversing the halls, soon bringing him to a certain bedroom in one of the highest points in the castle. After a moment of hesitation, Leo opens the door and walks in to see the man he believes to be the murderer of Lady Reed. Looking up, the man reveals himself to be Noah Hive Reed, Ariana Reed's eldest son.
Well, look what we have here. Hoping to prove your innocence, I presume.
Yes, and in doing so, I plan to prove you guilty.
Whatever do you mean?
All of the evidence points to you. You benefit the most from Lady Reed's death, as you've become the lord of this land, being her eldest son. I also met the man who sold you the potion to kill her, and the rings he described could only be yours.
Curse those rings. I shouldn't have been so careless. Though, since you're here, I suppose it will be much easier to dispose of the evidence. Tybalt, if you will.
Leo feels something cold at the back of his neck, presumably the tip of a blade.
You know too much to be brought to the guards, so I'm afraid you will have to die here by my hand.
Leo recognizes the voice as the same as the server who gave him the flagon of wine during the feast where Ariana was killed.
Merrick, is that you?
Actually, Leo, this is my most loyal servant, Tybalt. He's the only one I'd ever even think to trust enough to carry out the plan that I'm sure you're all too aware of.
Honestly, I'm surprised you recognized my voice. I thought I was able to change it rather well.
I'm afraid to say that won't be your only surprise tonight.
Noahive, speechless, looks behind Leo to see Evelyn standing there, her sword drawn.
Noahive Reed, you are under arrest for the murder of your mother, Ariana Reed.
Evelyn, don't you think we can work something out? I did this so that we could be free from the king, so Timus could prosper like it once did. If you side with me, I can give you more power than you could imagine.
I vowed to fight on the behalf of justice, so I will have to ask that you and your servant come with me.
Epilogue. About a month after the arrest of Noahive Reed, Oculi is behind the counter of his shop, scribbling a label onto a potion used to make plants grow faster. Just as he places it on the shelf, he hears the door open and looks to see the new king of Timas, Alexander Reed, standing there.
Oh, King Reed, this is certainly a surprise. I hope you're not here to shut down my business, like your mother tried to do.
Actually, I have something entirely different in mind. I'd like to hire you to make potions for me directly. Of course, you'll still be able to sell them to others, but I'll have a place for you to stay in the castle, and I'll expect you to fulfill certain requests I may have.
You have my interest, but tell me, why do you want my services? Don't worry, I swear I won't tell a soul, and I always keep my word.
Well, to be entirely honest, I believe I'll find your work quite useful. I prefer calculated planning to brute force. I trust you think similarly?
Well, absolutely. I'd be honored to work for you, especially after you separated from the king of the realm. I never liked him very much, especially after he decided that making magic would be a crime. It's disgraceful.
In that case, I'll have a cart here in less than an hour so you can transport your belongings to the castle. I already have a room for you.
Alexander leaves the small shop, smiling to himself, amused by the fact that no one would ever know that it was he who convinced Noahive to murder their mother. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy our content, then consider supporting us through Patreon, where you can earn a bunch of rewards. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Facebook and Twitter for future content. This was performed by a group of amazing voice actors. All our links are in the description below. We'll see you next time.